Hey there, writers, and welcome back to the Well-Storied podcast. I am Kristen Kiefer, and this podcast is where I translate articles from the Well-Storied blog into audio so you can listen in on the go. Today, I have taken a very old blog post that was in great need of a complete overhaul, and I have completely updated it, and I am sharing it with you again on the blog and also here on the podcast. This episode is called Does Your Story's Sidekick Serve a Purpose? And if you would like to listen or read along as you listen in, make sure to head on over to well-storied.com/sidekick. Now let's dive in. Does your story's sidekick serve a purpose? The best friend, the sassy coworker, the fellow thief on the crew. Our story's sidekicks can come in all shapes and sizes, but the one thing that unifies them is their potential to aid our protagonists through the toughest times in their personal journeys, and maybe create a little secondary tension along the way. With such strong purposes to serve, one would think that crafting sidekicks would be a cinch, but it's not often that a truly sensational right-hand character finds their way onto the pages of a book. So how can you ensure that your protagonist sidekick adds real and memorable value to your story? Let's break down my top tips today, writer. And first, we must ask one very important question. Should your story include a sidekick? A sidekick is a secondary character whose primary role is to aid the protagonist as they work to achieve a goal, overcome an antagonist, or undergo necessary internal development, or perhaps all three. Though fairly ubiquitous in fiction, a sidekick isn't often essential to a story's success. If your own protagonist doesn't need the aid or encouragement of a peer, or if including a sidekick wouldn't be true to the narrative of your story, don't feel pressured to add such a character in your book. If, however, you know your protagonist could benefit from a little help in their journey, you're in luck. Sidekicks are very versatile characters, often appearing as friends, partners, roommates, co-workers, or fellow students, or even as mere acquaintances. But no matter which specific role your sidekick serves, how can you ensure they pull their weight? It's time we ask ourselves a second question. Are you making this simple sidekick mistake? The biggest mistake a writer can make when crafting their story's sidekick is to treat them as a throwaway character, good for a single purpose and useless thereafter. As with any secondary character in your book, sidekicks should be treated as the protagonists of their own stories, crafted with as much care and attention as any lead. As we discussed in our podcast episode on crafting memorable mentors, sidekicks' lives should never revolve solely around the protagonist and their needs. Treating them as mere comedic relief or the protagonist's sole sounding board is a surefire way to make them more than a little forgettable. Instead, take the time to develop your story's sidekick fully. I have an article that will help you do just that on the Well-Storied blog called 33 Ways to Write Stronger Characters, and you can find that at well-storied.com/strongercharacters. We also have a podcast episode for that article, so make sure to check that out as well. The most memorable of sidekicks both encourage the protagonist and serve secondary purposes that make them irreplaceable to the story's plot. But what exactly can those purposes be? Here are 6 ways your story's sidekick can pull their weight. Remember, everything and every character in your novel must serve a purpose. As you work to craft a sensational sidekick for your story, consider how they might fulfill one or more of the following key purposes. Purpose number 1, they can serve as a foil. Many authors craft sidekicks whose personalities or mindsets greatly contrast the protagonist in an effort to amplify the protagonist's qualities. For example, Han Solo serves as a foil to Luke Skywalker's easy optimism and belief in the Force, with his cynical nature and trust in his street smarts alone. Depending on the qualities you wish to highlight, a sidekick can foil the protagonist in a positive or negative manner. Purpose number 2, they can aid the cause. Whether by aiding the protagonist directly or by working alongside the protagonist to fulfill a greater purpose, a sidekick can lend their unique skills and insights to a story's core cause. For example, Samwise Gamgee aided Frodo in his journey to deliver the One Ring to Mount Doom, thus helping the Fellowship save the entirety of Middle-earth from the Dark Lord Sauron. Purpose number 3, they can provide encouragement. Your protagonist will undergo many trials and tribulations during the course of their story. A sidekick can encourage the protagonist to take specific actions or remind them of their motivations when all else seems lost. Purpose number 4, they can create secondary tension. Sidekicks provide a vast amount of opportunity to further complicate your protagonist's journey by providing secondary tension. This may be in the form of a disagreement between the two characters or through a more physical event, such as, for example, the troll that attacks Hermione Granger in the bathroom during Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Purpose number 5, they can confront the hero. Protagonists don't always make the best choices, both for themselves and for others. When the hero screws up, your story's sidekick can be the one to confront them, urging them to reconsider their actions. Consider, for example, the many times Dr. Watson encourages Sherlock to be more compassionate when dealing with others during his cases. And finally, purpose number 6, they can deepen the story world. Sidekicks can help round out a character's real-life setting or fictional story world in many ways. In conversation, sidekicks can reveal key expositional details or discuss past events, while through their own circumstances and experiences, they can present a whole new side to the story's themes and its world's realities. You see this, for example, in the Hunger Games series, when Finnick Odair reveals how the Capitol continues to abuse the competitors who survive the games, by telling Katniss of his own enslavement. Developing a sidekick who serves several of these 6 key purposes can be a great way to ensure their character packs a punch, though this list certainly doesn't encompass all the ways your sidekick can lend value to your story. One of my favorite activities is to read novels critically, considering how each sidekick serves the protagonist and the story as a whole. This often reveals many new and exciting ways my own sidekicks can liven up my stories. My most recent discovery? An antagonist who masquerades as a sidekick to earn the protagonist's trust, then later comes to love and aid them all the same. If you're struggling to craft a well-developed sidekick of your own, I'd encourage you to give this exercise and today's tips a try. A little study and a whole lot of intention can go a long way toward ensuring you write some fantastic fictional sidekicks your readers won't soon forget. Writer, thank you so much for listening in to today's episode of the podcast. I know it was a bit of a shorter one today, but I hope it really packed a punch for you and gave you some great tips and tricks for improving your story's own sidekicks and really giving them all the purpose and value that can make their characters so great. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to receive future episodes of the podcast. And also, if you can, it would mean the world if you could give this podcast and this episode a quick rating, or a review, whatever you can do from wherever you're listening in from, as it all goes to help get the podcast more visibility and reach new readers. So thank you very much if you can do that. That would mean so much. If you don't know, I also host a Patreon account for Well-Storied. Patreon is simply a place where you can come and support your favorite creators by making a small monthly pledge to their success. And so if you're enjoying the podcast and all that I create for Well-Storied and would like to support it monetarily, make sure to come on over to patreon.com/wellstoried. I will leave that link for you in today's episode description as well. Writers, again, thank you so much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!